Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Is this one on? Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you for being here. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there any need for translation today? Okay, I don't see any. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, now we'll move on to board member discussion. I actually don't have anything for legislative report today. The only thing for board member discussion I did want to mention is that this morning I was able to attend part of our leadership, what's the meeting called? Admin retreat. And it was awesome. It was great. I was there for just about an hour kind of for their intro stuff. And the very first thing that Dr. Perez talked about was how we have great people in our district and how, and it's true, we've got a lot of really great people working in our district, people that care about our students. So it was awesome to be there. Another day tomorrow, right? Anything else for board member discussion? Marissa also wanted to get some head counts for some of these upcoming events for people who are going to be able to attend the new teacher orientation, the OHS freshman family nights. There's a barbecue at that one. And then the all-staff orientation on August 25th. I will definitely be at the orientation and both orientations. I'm not sure about the family night. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
What day is the family night again?
The 24th.
Should be able to go to that one. Okay. The family night at 5.
Director Burnett, are you available to help barbecue on that day? I know it's your favorite thing.
Yeah.
Put Tim down too.
Put me down for the barbecue one on that one.
Okay.
Put me down for definitely for the orientation.
Okay. You got enough information for now on that? Okay. Great. We've already approved the agenda. We will move on to accounts payable warrants too. The consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Consent agenda approved. Now we'll move on to accounts payable warrants 2. I'll accept a motion to approve accounts payable warrants 2.
I will make a motion to approve accounts payable warrants 2.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So 3 ayes with 1 abstention. I don't know. It's the next one you need to abstain on.
I don't know.
Now we're going to do accounts payable warrants 3. I'll accept a motion to approve accounts payable warrants 3.
You can do that one. I'll make a motion.
This is the one that Birdie's going to... What?
Do I have to say the whole thing?
No, you're good. But this is the one that Birdie's going to abstain on.
Okay.
This one.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. So that's 3 in favor with 1 abstention. Okay, we will go ahead and move on to superintendent informational items.
Just a couple items tonight. One is the draft superintendent goals. We had an opportunity to meet with you as a board and some of the staff from the school district last week talking about draft goals for the board. There's also a conversation there about making sure that the superintendent goals live within those direct board goals. This is just the first draft. Tonight is just about getting that in front of you, getting a chance for you to look at it. I know that by the end of August, we're required to, at least in our district practices and superintendent contract, to present these goals and to talk about them at a public meeting. I think at our next meeting, we'll also be talking about the board goals, so I think it'd be more appropriate at that time to make sure that there's alignment there and a consistency. But you will see just at a high level consistency around facilities and what that means for communications related to capital levy and a bond, and also a particular focus on Othello High School and transition there, and some real clear direction from the board about the 9 through 12 experience we want for our students. So again, just in there as an initial draft for you to take a look at, to give feedback around, and then we'll talk about them more specifically when we get into the board goals at our meeting later in the month. The next item, if I can just jump right into that, is really what the bulk of the meeting's about. And we were giving Amy Suarez some good-natured ribbing today about, you know, the sort of the boring nature of budget presentations, just by default, if that's not your world. I know it's exciting for some of our spreadsheet people, but I do want to share a couple things. One is the incredible importance of this work. It's a board's responsibility to make sure that we're being good stewards of the finances that the state and the federal government provide for us, that our local taxpayers invest in our schools. And we want to make sure we stretch that dollar as far as we can, especially in times when school budgets are shrinking, when school enrollments are shrinking, and when salaries and costs and expenditures are increasing. It's a very difficult time for any industry, and it's no different for public ed right now. Amy and her team, as they prepare the budget, as you all know, are very detailed. We have such a strong history of clean audits and thoughtful preparation and a conservative way of looking at the budget, which I think our board and our community expect. You will see some things today, particularly in the four-year budget section, that I think most people would find alarming, would make you sit back and say, wow, that's where we might head. And so I hope you pay particular attention to those parts. What I think it's important to remind the board about and the community about is those are four-year projections in a very conservative budget. Also understanding that the OSPI was required by House Bill 2049 to put together a work group. And so for the last 2 years, they've been working on how do we need to change the funding model in Washington State so we don't put school districts in the predicament that many of them are in. We're still a year or two behind some of the school districts that are in real trouble to maintain and sustain their services and to have balanced budgets. I think we've done an excellent job of cutting where we need to, assessing our system and saying this is a nice to have, and we'd love to have it for our students and staff, but in this time we might not need it. We have another year or two before it gets mission critical, right, where we really have to think about some deeper cuts. But I don't want us to, I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness of the concern, but I also want to balance that with, we have an excellent team who put together a conservative budget, and we have the state who is required to look at these funding formulas because they're broken, not just in Othello, but across the state of Washington. So I just want to make sure that you have that context and that setting as Amy and Lori share what we know is not a boring budget. It's actually an exciting opportunity to think about all the good work that Aaron heard about today that we're discussing at the admin retreat about that our staff did the last couple of years and that we hope to do this year. None of that work gets done if people don't get paid. We had a little bit of a scare last payroll because of a computer glitch. There were 2 school districts in Washington where we weren't sure we were going to make the payroll cutoff to cut checks in time. The money was in the bank, but there was a communication error on the technical side. Imagine we don't pay people 1 month, right? The work doesn't get done. The morale and the interest in coming to work, and when you press on people when budgets shrink, it can be, it impacts students directly. It gets down to the classroom level. So excited to hear what we know is not going to be a boring budget presentation. And I know that Amy and Lori and I would certainly welcome questions from the board so that when community members ask you, how are things going around this topic, that you're prepared and informed. So we'll turn it over to Amy and Lori.
Okay, well, here we go for another budget. As Pete said, I love the budget, and I think most of my team does. It is the hardest one because there's so many ifs, what ifs, and there's a lot of moving pieces to the budget. So I want to acknowledge Lori. Lori does for the funds. She does the ASB, the capital projects, debt service, and the vehicle fund so that I can put all my attention to the general fund. Another person who has a big impact on the budget is Angie, and she's not here tonight, but I wanted to give her a shout out because even though she's dealing with health issues, she was able to do the big part of the HR budget. And you know you're a rock star when you're able to do that. So anyways, I won't say more on that. So the district administration, the board, you guys will be approving the budget in a couple of weeks. That's your biggest things that you have to do. What we do as the executive team, we have to monitor the budget and make sure that we stay within the parameters. So gonna kind of go fast, Birdie, so if you want to stop me at any point, feel free, okay? I know this is your first budget, so.
Oh, I was going, don't ask me if you're, I was going, gosh, she knows my math skills. Keep that on the down low there.
Okay, so school finance, there's a lot of things that, lingo we call it, but there's only several ones that we're going to go over tonight. The rest you can read. The big one is IPD, the implicit price deflator. This year's price IPD was 2.6%. So that means that is with the labor contracts. That's what we pass on to our employees. The funded positions get the 2.6%. And then we pass that on to our employees. I have the historical information there. You can see that the previous years it was 2.5, 3.7, 3.7, and 5.5. So you can see where we landed. The other one is TK. So last year we were saying that there was going to be cuts in TK. So all of last year we were thinking we were going to have like funded for 70, even though we actually had 80 TK students. We found out towards the end of the year that we were going to get funded for the full 80, and we'll continue to do so for this school year.
Just a quick question. Can you explain just briefly how that IPD percentage is determined? Who determines that?
The OSPI does, yeah.
I have another question. The TK, is that for just this year? So it's just funded for this year, the 80 is just for this
The
year?
80, for 26, 27, we know that we're going to get funded for 80. We were also funded for 80 in 25, 26.
Okay.
Just maybe two comments about each of those questions. TK was cut significantly in the state of Washington. They did an excellent job of protecting rural communities that are, I think the term that I'm not sure that is always appreciated, but it's one that used commonly, is like preschool deserts, places where they don't have access to private preschool. And so I think we feel in a strong position with TK and where that's at across the state. You asked about IPD. We try not to conflate these two ideas in terms, but in sort of the talking with the public, it really is a cost of living adjustment. So the state says, here's what inflation is doing, here's the revenue that's coming in, we're going to use this number, and that's what's seen as flow-through funds to contracts in the state of Washington. Before we leave this slide, I do want to also call out the prototypical funding model. So the House Bill 2049, which required OSPI to look at the model and use school district experts and partners to think about that work, that's one of their primary goals, is to say, here's how we fund all schools in Washington. Should we be thinking differently about the type of student that goes there and the services that those students need? And should we fund them at a different level? So it's being more targeted in how we fund, and perhaps in a place like Othello that would result in enhanced funding. They just haven't finished the work yet, but that's one we should pay attention to as well in the next year or two.
The next one, levy. So as we all know, during this school year, 26-27, we're going to get the last portion of the levy that's falling off, and then we're going to get the increase in 2027 of the new levy. Local effort assistance, that's the money that the state gives us because we passed our levy. This year, we're projecting to get $5 million in LEA funding. So, fund balance, that's the savings that the school district has. That's what's left over after all the revenue is received and all the expenses are paid. Why do we need fund balance? We need fund balance to cash flow in case of any emergencies. The state doesn't always give us the apportionment and equal payments. So, for example, in May and June, I think they give us like 5%, and other months they give us 12%. So you really need to have that cash flow for when the dips come. The other thing that I had noted on here was our average expenditures in 25-26 each month was about $6.6 million. in June of this year, our total revenues were $5 million. So that's where that money comes into play. So does that make sense?
Just really quick question. At the bottom, you have the binding conditions. So that's eight districts in Washington that are
Right now,
in
there's
binding
8 districts in binding conditions, and probably we're headed to, from what I hear, we're going to have several more.
Okay.
Are those locally? Any locally?
The closest one here is it Prescott?
Prescott was in deep trouble, but the one of any scale would be Kaibi.
Kaibi, yeah.
Yeah. What happened to Kaibi, not only sort of this issue that exists across the state, they also had a double levy failure. And so when you get in that situation, there's deep cuts. To tie in a little bit, Amy, IPD and prototypical funding model. So let me use JR as an example. So in your operation, if you have the guys who transport the product, the onions in and out, you have a warehouse manager, maybe you have people in the warehouse sorting and doing all those things, and then you as a leader or the corporate says we're going to give everyone a 5% raise, but we're only going to give it to the guys hauling and the guys managing. Nobody else is going to get it. And it results in this much extra money. Are those people who aren't getting that IPD raise, are they going to be aware of that? How are they going to feel about that? When you think about the prototypical funding model, we might get funded for 200 teachers in Othello, but we have 300. Those other 100 people, they expect IPD as well. And our contracts require right now that we pay that. So locally, we have to come up with that funding model. That's part of the reason the binding conditions across the state of Washington, they're not funded at the level that's required right now in our systems. There's a gap that exists there.
So for my reasoning, Speed, is that how it's always been? Has the state always just covered, let's just say, using your numbers, covered 2 out of the 300 teachers? Has that typically been how Washington State?
The typical funding model has been that, yes.
Okay.
The other term on here is MSOX, and just because I'll probably use it a lot, it's material, supplies, and operating expenses. It's the other 15% of our budget. So let's say 85 is salaries, and then 15 is for everything else. Okay, the next page. We do have to set guidelines, and we have state law that we have to follow. And like Pete said at the beginning, we also have the state auditor that comes and audits our financial statements every year. And I just want to make a note that we haven't had any findings since school year 18-19. Okay, the next page, district funds. By law, we have 5 funds. We have the general fund, which is where mostly everything happens. Then we have the capital projects. We have the debt service fund. That's where we're paying the bond. We have the ASB, which is for the kids, and then we have the transportation vehicle fund. What I want to make sure what's bold printed under the capital projects fund is that we are going to request $300,000 from the general fund to be transferred to capital projects during the school year for emergencies in case we need it in the future. Like if we have a glycol emergency, we got to have some money in there. We can always depend on the general fund to be able to fund it. So we're going to transfer that.
That's coming out of where?
The general fund, from the fund balance. The way I justified it in my head is we received about almost $500,000 this year in unexpected revenues, because I want to give a big shout out to Aurora that she in 2021 got an email from I'm not sure where, saying that Primera was going through a lawsuit, and if she completed the information and returned it, we were going to get some money out of this lawsuit to Primera. I went to a business managers conference last week, and I asked around if anybody else received that money. There was only one other district. They said, some other district said, oh, we got it personally. I go, okay, so if you got it personally, but the district didn't get any, it was because your payroll officer probably didn't do their part of it. So that's how we're justifying that transfer.
The other idea about the concept of having funds available, if you think about personal finance, we should really be viewing that as emergency fund. If there's an emergency and we need access to cash to pay for that emergency to a facility, we want to have it there. And this restricts the ability for how those funds could be used. In your own personal finance, you might just, in the old days, right, you just put it in an envelope. That's our emergency envelope. But that doesn't mean you didn't go grab it when you wanted to go on vacation. In public funding, these sorts of funds are created so those kinds of things don't happen. And you're transparent about it. We're going to move this much money. We're going to put it over here, and it's there for an emergency.
No, the moving the 300,000, it's me being very picky on making sure that our savings, our fund balance stays healthy, because you never know what might happen, or
But at the same time, we want to make sure that our capital projects also has money for emergencies, like this emergency that happened in Hiawatha.
And I guess my question to you on that one, Amy, is if, let's just say we didn't have the money, like you said, in that little envelope on that side, and could you have came to the board and said, hey, we need to move this? Hey, all it would have taken was a vote from the board, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But, can I say something? Yeah. But now, I don't know if this is on. It's in the budget, where that might have created a little hiccup if we didn't have the budget capacity planning for it at this time of year, just in case, as opposed to in the middle of the year. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It just, like I said, my deal is to look at it as, that's fine, you put it in over and you want it for an emergency. If the emergency never comes, I'd also like to see that go back to the fund balance.
Okay. Noted. Any other questions on any of the other funds? Okay, in the next slide, this is where what you will be approving in a couple weeks on the resolution. These are the appropriation, that's the amount of expenditures. So for the general fund, we're going to be requesting $89.2 million, capital projects 1.7 million, debt service 2.8, ASB 775, and the vehicle fund 900,000, and expenditure authority. Doesn't say we're going to spend all of it, but you're giving us the authority to do so.
On the transportation, did we already take care of the new buses that we bought?
Yes, that's where we purchased the new buses.
Okay, I was just, yeah.
We'll have more information in detail when we get into that.
Yeah.
The legislative impacts, we've already talked about the IPD, the 2.6%. MSOCs per student, we got an increase of $41.97. In small print, you will see there that as our student count goes down, so does the amount that we receive for material, supplies, and operating costs, but it still costs the same to turn on the lights.
Mrs. Ramey, how much did it go up from last year to this year?
$41.97.
That was what we got this year?
This is what we're going to get in 26, 27.
What did we have last year in 25, 26?
The increase, I would have to look. I can get that information to you. The SEB insurance, that's the medical insurance for our employees, it's going up 5.13% per funded FTE, per the prototypical funding formula. We also have to pay that amount for our substitutes. This year, I just checked, we had 32 subs who qualified to receive medical insurance. That is not funded. The other note on, while we're on that, on SEB, substitutes, one of the things that WASBO was trying to pass this year was for our substitutes to be fully funded. So I did a quick check just now, and we we had $1.1 million in sub cost, not including payroll taxes, just straight cost. And we get funded for substitutes, 195 teachers for 4 days at $151. So we received $118,000 in sub cost from the state.
If you'll remember from the legislative report a few weeks ago, that's one of the legislative priorities for all the organizations is the fully funding the substitute costs.
So we're required to give our employees sick leave, but yet we don't get funded for it, basically is what it. The other, let me see, the reductions to Running Start does not really affect us that much. That's not a big change to our school district. The other big thing that they did to the vehicle fund is that they're extending the depreciation. So we're going to be getting less revenues. We'll get into more detail, less revenues in our transportation. So that means that we will not be able to purchase as many buses as we have. So that may require another budget transfer, a transfer from our general fund if we ever get into a hiccup with there.
Back to Director Perneta's question. In last year's budget presentation, this time of year, MSOC increased by $81 per student. So you can see that's about half that.
Yep. Thanks, Pete.
Mm-hmm. The other one, HB 2049, we brought that up last year, where they were giving us a big bump in LEA. Now, if you remember, LEA is what we get, the state gives us because we passed our levy. So now we're going to get into, that gave us a bump. So if you see in the next slide, there's a lot of numbers on this slide. And there's a lot of numbers that are driven by enrollment and property values. With that being said, a lot of this information can change. So I wanted to show what we actually received during the school year of 25-26. We received $3.1 million in levy and $5 million in LEA for a total of $8.2. Because of the increase to the levy that we passed and the increase to the LEA amount, we're going to get $9.9 million in school year 26-27. But moving forward, the amounts that we're going to get in LEA is going to be a lot less. So even though our levy amounts are going to be going up, the LEA amount's going to be going less. So if you see the numbers on the very bottom, you can see that. So this year we're going to get 1.1 million more than we did in 25-26, but then it's going to start going down.
Why is that?
That's a good question. Last year, if you were to look at this slide from last year, we were projecting that in 28, 29, we're going to be a lot significantly more. And then we received an email after we passed our levy saying that they had made an error in that spreadsheet and that we're actually going to be getting less.
Sister Amy,
It's just that they gave us that bump for 2 years, and now it's going to go less.
how close were our projections from last year's meeting to what we actually got? Like, what was how close did you guys?
I think we received more in LEA than what we expected.
Right, okay.
I don't know if you have that slide up, Pete, from last year.
So we didn't know that bump was only the 2 years?
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, these numbers are based on our enrollment and property values, which we have absolutely no say in. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is if you see that in 26, our property, we paid $1.28 per thousand, so we didn't even get the full LEA.
So we actually lost
We got
money.
85% of it. So you'll need to remember the decrease in the LEA when we talk about the 4-year projections.
What was the earlier question about? What were you asking me to look up?
What did we project in last year that we would get this year in 25-26 in LEA?
LEA and levy, the total?
Yeah,
I have 7.9.
yeah. So and we got 8.2, and these are actuals.
Yeah.
Pete, I'm going to throw a crazy question, and it's the gentleman that could probably answer it is over in the audience, but what are we doing to change, or what, are we looking at things to change to be able to fully get the $1.50 and not come back to where we are not allowed to collect or drop under the $1.50? Have they discussed that?
Yeah, so I think the conversation is about when we set and Dr. Meek, you're welcome to step in if you feel appropriate. When we set the amount that we were going to collect, we set this maximum amount. And we set an aggressive target to make sure we would continue to collect the $1.50. What happened at the levy previous, when we had the massive increase in assessed value by the county assessor, that number went below $1.50. So if we're only collecting $1.23 locally, the state's not going to fill that gap as much. So we set up the levy in a way to deal with that issue.
Okay, so okay.
The Future Ready teams decided on the 150 in part so that we could, tell people that it was staying the same, that we weren't trying to go for an increase, that we're keeping it at the 150 that we passed before. So that was a discussion we had about, what to set it at. But they decided. Yeah, it was just
I just didn't want to make sure that. Because on this one where we had agreed to the 150, but because of the assessments of property, we were only able to collect the 128.
Right, no one expected that huge bump in property values. That what year that was? Yeah.
The other thing to be mindful about is that, and this is, I'm looking at Director Gerber because I know you pay close attention to legislative action, and there's quite a momentum to try and get the $1.50 moved to a higher number, like to be $2.50, which would put more pressure on local taxpayers to fund at a higher rate. And so while that's not the current reality, it's something very important for us to watch, because I know you all valued, and so did our Future Ready Schools team, at keeping that rate at $1.50 to maximize it. If all of a sudden they say now you have to collect at $2.50 to maximize it, then the LEA formula just went out of whack again. And so it's something that we all need to watch very carefully.
The other thing, too, when we were running the levy and we used this exact tool to figure out how much we would get when we passed the levy, that had the higher amounts in the LEA amount. But when OSPI sent out an email like a week after the levy, and it said, guess what? We made an error. The tool was wrong, so.
Just love those guys.
What was that?
So we just love those guys.
Okay, the next slide is only for information, just what we received in the past in Levy LEA. The orange line is kind of like buying power. So this slide is from OSPI, and they did it for every district. I just pulled ours. So here it shows in 2025, we received a total of $7.46 million, and it just kind of gives you history on that. Okay, we're going to spend the next probably 8 slides or so on enrollment.
So, quick question on that graph.
Yes.
So why is the orange line getting closer to the bars? I don't understand, I guess, why that's happening.
They adjusted to inflation. So in 2018, even though we received $8.47 million, our buying power in today's world would be $11.34 million. So enrollment, we're going to talk a lot about enrollment because that is what gives us our revenues, right? So we're going to talk about student FTE and then the average. What's important between student FTE and the average is we can have in September 4,219 students and we get all excited, and then in June we have 4,089. And then the average, and that's what we get paid on. We get paid on the average, so that's the average annual enrollment. Then from that enrollment, that's where they figure out the prototypical funding. This is how much you qualify for the number of principals, administrators, teachers, et cetera. So that produces the staff units, gives us the salary and benefits, gives us the MSOC funding, and then that gives us our total revenue. In September, October, November, and December, we will receive funding apportionment based on the numbers that I'm going to submit today. Then in January, they see what our average is for the previous 4 months, and then they make it pure. I don't know how to explain that. Like, if our enrollment's higher, we're going to get a big bump. But if our enrollment is lower, they're going to adjust our apportionment.
Just one comment about House Bill 2049, and if this is how funding works in Washington, the charge for that committee is to think about whether or not this is appropriate for our students and staff. And at the student FTE and that prototypical model, that line, one of the items they're considering is weighted student averages. So every student in Washington is going to get this level of funding, which is how it currently works. But it maybe if you're, let's think of some categories. If you're a student who's experienced homelessness, if you're a multilingual learner, whatever the patterns or categories that exist that we know require additional supports, the state's actually going to fund those students at a level that allows districts to staff and operate their schools at a level to meet those needs. It's currently not the model in Washington. It's a model in a number of states across the United States, but it's not the model here.
That would include special education funding as well.
Special education already has this enhanced portion, but it would include, considerations for that.
Pete, that, what did you call it? 20, what's the number you said it was? 24, what was it?
House Bill 2049.
So who is the ones that are debating, or are they administrators, teachers, community members?
Yeah.
Board members?
Yeah, so it was passed in 2049, and part of the legislation says that the group needs to include give me a moment to find it.
Go ahead.
All right, we'll go to the next slide. So this slide is going to show what I budgeted for 25-26, and then what the final average was. So as you can see here, last year I was saying we're going to have 4,234 students, K-12. Only 4,149. That was our final average. That was 85 less than budget.
Do we know what contributed to this minus 85? Is it like kids who just move? Is it?
I had the same question, Mariah, and there was, I think it was in May, I said, Alondra, I said, is there a way that I can tell where these kids are, like when we get a withdrawal? Is there some, where can I find out? So she did some research, and then, so the next slide shows where we withdrew all our kids. So, because I had the same questions, like, where did they go? I was expecting them. You can see 28 moved out of the country, 29 moved out of state, 20 went to our Othello digital learning, 28 went to online school, SkillSource had 29.
When they go to the online, do they still count as our students, or is that?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's different funding. That doesn't count
That doesn't
towards
come
our
out of this one.
It's different type of funding that we get.
Okay.
So are we going to anticipate that kind of number this year by the end of the year? Or I know that's hard to project, but
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, especially when we see that number of moving out of the country or out of the state.
We still did the whole roll-up. We'll get into that in another slide.
Okay.
One thing that I wanted to also point out here is that the number that I budgeted, the 4,234 in the previous slide, Lori, the 4,234 that I budgeted, that was already 50 less than the previous year. So our total less in 25-26 was 144 less than our average from the year before. And like I said, September we had 4,219 kids, and then in June we had 4,089. So every month I was like, oh my God, what is going on here? But like I said, this is where our kids are going.
I think back to Director Fote's question, when you look at the national data around, I think part of your comment was around maybe some of our students who have a country of origin outside the U.S., and so self-deportation is a thing now in our country and in our region in particular. So the number that they have out is certainly over 2 million across the country, and whether or not anecdotally are these some of the impacts we're feeling. I think one of the things we can do is, if we get the opportunity to engage with these families when they do withdraw, to ask some of those questions and to do a better job of assessing where they're going, why they're making that decision, so we can plan a little bit better.
In 24-25, I budgeted $4,290 using the same method that I'm doing for this school year, and our average was $4,293, so we were 3 over. So this, I feel like this was an anomaly. Like, that's why I went in to figure out where our students were going.
I also want to we also have to understand that we are an agricultural community, and it has been in a hurting stage here for the last 2 years, and there doesn't see any signs that it's going to get better this year going around. So these numbers, we really need to pay attention, because people are leaving to go look for work somewhere else, because they're just some of the things that have happened with 40-hour work weeks and things like that have affected us more than what we really understand.
Back to the question about the membership of the K-12 Funding Equity Group. It looks like there are about 100 to 120 members. A number of them listed are school district superintendents. There's a number of professional organizations represented. PESB, which is the Professional Educator Standards Board. Disability Rights Washington is represented by their attorney. K-12 Online. A number of it looks like professional lobbyists in the state of Washington representing the school principals, the University of Washington, our risk management pool, Washington Library Association, the Governor's Office of Indian Affairs, the Public School Employees Union. So broad categories. WASA is on there, WASDA, WEA. So it looks like a really broad coalition of people who are coming together and thinking about, and then down below in the last few pages, you'll see the number of state representatives that are included as well, and state senators who are participating in the, so they're in there in the room helping think about where we should go next.
Have they talked about a timeline, like we're hoping to present something by this time? Or
yeah, so by law, their recommendation has to be delivered by November 1st, 2027.
The next 2 slides is how are we projecting enrollment for 26-27. So what we do is we do the conservative roll-up. So this year's kinders will become next year's first graders. I don't make any deductions and, I think we're going to lose 3 kids in first grade or second grade or whatever. The only other adjustment that I make is the incoming 10th graders. I think what was the amount? I reduced it by 75 students, counting for them going to Running Start. So kindergarten is the big question mark that we always figure out, like where should we budget? That's our big unknown. We went ahead and budgeted that at 285, which is what we have this year. And we'll get into some more information on that in the next couple of slides. So in that slide, you can see where the 320 first graders become the 320 second graders and where the differences are going to be. Those differences are, we also made adjustments to our teachers. So like if we have 40 less first graders, but we're going to have 36 more second graders, we move some first grade teachers to second grade. So that's how that's worked. So in total, I am budgeting 97 less than our actual average for 25-26. So like I said, kindergarten is our big question mark. The blue arrow shows the students for the 25-26. So in 25-26, our kindergartners were born in 2020. There was 328 births in Adams County, and 85% of those kids became Othello kindergartners in 25-26 school year.
This wouldn't take into consideration, for example, I had my baby in Moses Lake, so they wouldn't be...
That's part of the
Yeah.
the
okay.
percentage.
Okay.
As you can see where I put the star, in 2021, there was 372 births, but I'm only projecting 285 because our kinder enrollment is kind of down, so we don't know. So to me, I'd rather play it safe here, and then if we need to, first week of school, if we end up with 50 more kindergartners, that's when I'm running to Pete saying we need to hire more teachers or something.
I'd rather be more conservative.
Let's see. Okay. We also have other enrollment in our district. We also have SPED PK, we have regular PK. Now we have ECAP. That's new for the school year. We have TK, Running Start, Open Doors, and ALE. So I budgeted 401 students for this year and about 414 for the next 3 years.
Which one is Open Doors? What
The
program is
40. So they go to SkillSource, and then we get enrollment from them, and then we.
And we had that last year, Amy, or is that
Yeah.
new? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The only thing that's new this year is the ECAP.
The ECAP, okay.
These students also, this enrollment count is not part of the prototypical funding. They get, like the preschool general, that's Levy Leah funded. So we don't, early learning SPED, we get SPED funding. ECAP will be a contract through the ESD. We get funding for TK, but it's a little different. Running Start, we also get those numbers, Open Doors, and ALE. They provide revenues, but it's not part of the formula. Okay. And then this one just shows how this 26-27 looks like compared to previous years, going back to the 2021 school year. You can see that trend. Okay, fund balance. We all know what fund balance is. That's the money in the bank, right? So what I'm projecting for each of the 5 funds, where we're going to begin, what our revenues are going to be, what our expenditures, our transfers out, and then the excess, which the excess of revenues over expenditures, I'm starting to call that net change in fund balance. So anything that's in red, that means that our expenditures were more than our revenues. So I'm projecting that our ending fund balance, worst case scenario, if we were to spend every dollar, which we normally don't, our ending fund balance would be $10,731. In previous years, where did I write that? We spend about 93% of what we budgeted. So just because we're budgeting $89.2 million, I do not expect that we're going to spend that much. But we will exceed our expenditures over our revenues. Okay, next page.
And at the next meeting, or when we go to approve the budget, will we be able to see where the what's been spent and where we were excessive, I guess? Is that
Yeah, we're gonna get into all that.
all right.
I did shorten the slide presentation by 20, but still taking us a while to get there. Okay, the next one, budget comparison. It's just what I budgeted last year and what I'm budgeting this year, and the differences. I did notice right before the meeting that I did have an error in the capital projects, and you can see that in the red. As you can see, the only big number that should jump out is the revenues that we were receiving in capital projects, and that's because we're getting a big grant for the air quality assessments, and then we're going to expend it out. The other thing to notice is even though we're getting 2.6% for our salaries and we're getting 2.6 for our MSOCs, if you can see that last year I projected our revenues to be 84.5 and now we're projecting 85. So there's a very small change. That's because last year, if you remember, I had our enrollment higher, and that's making the difference. If you remember, I'm budgeting about 160 kids less than last year. 183 less than last year's budget. Okay, now we're going to get into the weeds on the general fund. This slide is an OSPI slide, and this one just says of the overall expenditures of the state of Washington, this is how much they spend on K-12 funding. You can see that in 1921, it was 51.6, and now it's 42.23. I did have this slide last year, but it's still relevant, so I still wanted to make sure that to keep this in front of you. If you see what's in green, it says, even with investments in recent years by the state legislator, funding per student falls short of McCleary decision funding amounts by about $250 per student. And then I didn't include this in your presentation, but I kind of wanted to quote Reichtel here, and he said, the legislator has not fully funded the state's paramount duty since 2019, but sadly they embraced the governor's proposed cuts to education. The budget makes harmful reductions to programs that directly serve students, reductions that are likely to impact students identified as low income the most. So. The next slide.
I do want to, as you share that comment from Superintendent Reichtel, I think locally a way to view that very same statement is to say we have $14-15 million in reserve. We can preserve that, or we can use some of that to continue to make the investment in our staff and our students and in our families, knowing that that number is going to come down, so that when a determination is made at the state level, hopefully we can begin to rebuild that. So I know there can be some nervousness when you see dramatic drops in a predicted fund balance. Part of the reason for the last decade, board, including some of you and others, put that money in the bank for these moments right here. Do we cut everything that our kids need to keep that balance high, or do we say what's a reasonable number, what's a reasonable percentage, and we don't love spending it, but this moment requires it. And I think that's the thing for the board to wrestle with over the next few weeks as you consider approval of the budget.
Okay, the next one, revenues. We have 7 pockets of where we get money from. Okay, so we get local taxes, local non-tax support, which is mostly interest that we make on the money that we don't spend, that fund balance. We invest that and we get interest on that. This year we're getting about $550,000 on that. We also get the state general purpose. That's mostly from the prototypical funding and SPED, state special purpose, federal programs, and then we get a little bit money from other districts, and then the new one is the ECAP funding that we'll get this year. So my projected revenues for this year is $85 million compared to last year's budget of $84.5. On average, we have received about 95% of the revenues that I budgeted. So, and there is a little bit that I budget extra in case grants come up, and we want to be able to show that we're going to have the revenues and the expenditure authority for it. If we don't receive the revenues, we don't spend it. The next slide shows what all those buckets are. So if you guys have any questions on where we receive our money, we can go into more details. If not, we can move on. Okay. Now we're going to go expenditures by program. So when we get an expenditure, we're always coding them. We code them first to, of course, that it's an expenditure, and then the program, and then the activity, and then the object code. So you're going to see slides where it shows it by program, by activity, and then by object. And that just it's still the same money, but they all tell a different story. So this one shows where we spend them by program. So how much we spend on regular instruction, special education, CTE, other grants, and community services, and then the support services. And over the past 5 years, we have spent 92%. So 5 years is the 5 years that I've done the budget. So we have spent 92% of the budget. I'm the type of person, or I'm the type of business manager where just because it's in the budget doesn't mean I'm going to let you spend it. You know what I mean? So 92% is what we spent from our budget.
Sorry, what's the compensatory education?
If we go to slide 28, you will see it there that it's all our state and federal grants. It's our LAP, our bilingual, and our federal grants, like Title I, Title II, Title III.
I have a question too. So tell me if I'm wrong, but right now we have the total expenditures being 89 million, but you had budgeted in our revenues as 85.
Correct.
So then what are we doing with that 4 million?
That's where fund balance comes into play.
Okay.
And why I think that's such an excellent question, and it's the notes that I wrote down. Those high-level numbers for the board to consider, what you just said is exactly what I wrote down. Hey, we have 89 coming in, or going out, but we only have 85 coming in. We got a $4 million hole here. That $4 million, as Amy positioned, is a very conservative estimate. Actually, in this instance, it's an aggressive estimate. We're not going to be that far off. What the board for over the last decade has charged the district with considering is maintain 10% in reserve of expenditures. So if we're spending 90 million, how much should we have in the bank? How much? What's 10% of 90?
9
million in the bank. That should be our target. Hey, we feel like we're healthy if we're at 9 million. So when Amy jumps into some of these numbers, that might be another one to remember. How far are we away from $9 million, and when do we get past that where we don't feel so certain? Because binding conditions, how much would you have in reserve? 0. There are school districts with $0, and that's why the model has to be addressed at the state level. You can't have a school district that's out of money. Doesn't make any sense in our state, right?
It doesn't make sense, Pete, but no offense, I don't trust the state to come in, and heck, they haven't been able to figure out anything, and I'm not, for my biggest deal is, it took us how long to save that? The previous boards made sure that we had it. If we keep consistently going and spending, we'll be in that same shoes in 2 years. And that is the fear that so far we as a board had to feel when we had to make cuts to make it right. If we come close to spending the $4 million, that puts us at 11. We wouldn't take another year to put us under what we would consider 10%. Somebody who runs a business outside, you look at that and you don't expect somebody to come save you if you're not going to save yourself. That is the struggle, at least for me, is to say, like you said, where's the fine line? Where do you feel comfortable? Where do you, and you don't ever want to harm or cut jobs or anything else, but at what point do we not want to be in a Kaibi situation or something else where then we're having to make even worse or drastic cuts? So
yeah, and I appreciate that perspective for sure. That part of me says the paramount duty of the state of Washington is to educate the children that live in our state. And if they're failing to do that, and they've been charged with addressing it, I've got to trust that the entire state being impacted by that kind of decision making, that they're at least going to look at it. What I also have to balance is we made some cuts a couple years ago. We closed a DOHS. We had some success there, but it also hurt. We cut some positions. We increased class size. Those cuts are planned and have been developed. I just don't think we should do them before we absolutely have to. Now, if the board says you have to do it because we don't feel comfortable with that 10% number, we want this dollar amount, then we can go do that work. I think what I want to make sure that I'm clear with you about is our recommendation is that we fully understand the number. We know it can create some fear and apprehension as a board member to see that fund balance go down, but we want you to know that we're continuing to make that investment in our kids because we have the money in the bank. And so we're spending that money that's been saved for this critical moment, but also acknowledging what you're saying, JR. Next year, if they don't fix it or it doesn't look hopeful, we got to tighten the belt more. Just don't want to tighten it too much at the wrong time. Undoing cuts to programs and to people is hard to recover from. I think we have a good example in our neighbor to the north that had to experience some of that. I think we just want to, and it's right in alignment with the philosophy we shared, and I think the board shared when we had the cuts a couple of years ago. Just enough. Let's cut just enough. Let's be thoughtful about it. And when we have someone like Amy and her team that works in an aggressive way say, hey, this could be really bad if you don't pay attention to it, it makes the rest of us heightened and say, okay, we're paying attention to it. And we're going to draw it down in a way that is appropriate, but it should create some heartburn for the board. These are the kinds of difficult decisions you have to wrestle with. But it's and maybe I don't feel like I'm being naive about it, but maybe my approach is I want to balance my focus on the student experience with making sure we hit that 10% target. If this board isn't comfortable with that amount, at 10%, which would be $9 million, then we have to develop that and share with the community, here's our new target. Here's why we have made that decision. And we're fully open to having that conversation.
I have another question just because I'm starting to think about, we eventually want to go for a bond, right, and a capital levy and all these things. But what if we're in an area where we drop below 10% and we have no more cash flow? Like, does that impact the future? Or I don't know how to say what I'm thinking. Like,
yeah, those decisions become much more complicated. How are you communicating to a voter that this money is for a new school when you've just cut a number of people and you haven't been able to afford the staff you have? Isn't that new school going to require more people? Isn't it going to require more upkeep? That communication becomes much more of a challenge. And then you also have to consider, are there other types of levies, capital levies, just to keep the doors open and to give the services that our students need that you would have to consider and say, well, that new bond project is going to have to go on the back burner for a couple more years because we need to get through the next 2 years and we need to run a capital levy for a few years to address the gap. What you see in Western Washington is a number of school districts who run tech and safety levies. So they'll levy themselves 50 cents on this incredible assessed value, and they use all that funding for technology in their schools and for safety enhancements. We couldn't run a tech levy like that in Othello and be successful and then put a bond on top of it. Yeah. So it definitely will adjust the messaging if we're in that situation. We have invested a lot in the last 4 or 5 years in believing that as more school districts get into binding conditions, the state has to respond. They have to, and I want to be hopeful about that, because we can throw some shade at them and say what they haven't done. But all of our services and programs that we currently offered have been operated by the state. They've given us those funds to say, go make good things happen for students. And as more communities are impacted by a cut in services, I've got to hope that our citizens in Washington will step up and say, that's not right for our kids. We can't have class sizes like that. We can't cut band. We can't cut athletics. We can't cut the extracurriculars. All those programs that are good for students as they start to go away, I hope that the citizens rise up and say, now we got to fix this.
I was going to make a similar point to that having the state is going to be forced to do something about it. Having 8 schools in binding conditions is crazy. It's usually 0 or 1 or 2. And there's how many schools are going to hit binding conditions before we do?
The last I heard was about 6 more minimum.
Yeah.
Amy, are those on the west side? Or?
They don't tell us. So the meetings, they say we're expecting 6 to 8 more, but they don't tell us where. I do kind of keep up with, thinking Bellevue might be there.
That would be a one that would.
Yeah. That would make a lot of waves. Right?
That would make a lot of waves, but.
There is, and I think we've shared with the board, it's been a while, but there's a financial fitness tool that the state of Washington put out because we need to track what's happening across the state, because some ESDs and this OSPI was being surprised by school districts. What do you mean you're out of money? Haven't you been paying attention? That financial fitness tool gives you a good, and you can look up any school district in Washington that tells you where you rate. What we know about our own, and it's like the high school, red, yellow, and green, right? You want everything to be green. What we've seen coming for us is more of those are turning yellow, and we know that that's happening. And the data you're seeing here is yellow data. Hey, you should be alarmed a little bit. You should be paying attention. There's a yellow light you're approaching. You might want to slow down a little bit. Those red light districts are people who are running through the red light. There's going to be 20 of them, and so we've got to believe that it's an indicator of an unhealthy system. It's not sustainable.
Every time we get to talking about this, I think of Lindsay and our stepsister to the north, and I want to be nowhere near that deal over there.
Okay, so now the next page is the same thing, program, and then comparing it to the 25-26 budget. The only thing that changed quite a bit was probably our grants, and those grants, they're per student. So as our student enrollment goes down, so do the grant amounts. And then the other big thing is some of our federal grants have carryover. So what we don't spend this year, we could spend it next year, up to like 10-15%. But we're starting to use it all. So there's hardly any more carryover to the following year. And then the other thing, I think that was the only. Do you have any questions on that side? Okay. Then we're going to go by object, and this is where it's salaries for all programs, supplies for all programs, purchases for all programs. So it's not just basic ed, it's all programs together. How much do we spend in total for certificated staff compared to last budget? How much are we spending on all the other things? So you can see in 25-26, I budgeted 52.25% of our total budget to go to certificated salaries. This year it's 52.94. So every year, because the IPD is 2.6, but everybody also gets the 2.6, they also get longevity, that's creating a little bit more percentage every year. Does that make sense?
Okay. The financial fitness tool, that's financial health provided by the state auditor's office. To give you some context for Washington, how many school districts are there in Washington? Remember? 295, right? So that number's in your head. Red, yellow, green. There are 217 school districts with a concerning indicator in their financial health. Red, out of 295. There are only 21 without any, less than 10%. So again, a real indicator of an unhealthy system that's not sustainable.
When that tool first came out, I don't know, 3 years ago, we were one of the, but back then there was like 60 or 70 school districts that had nothing, and we were one of them. Now we're in the yellow, I believe.
Okay, we're in the yellow, but do you act like we're in the red? When you, is that?
Because I budget to worst case scenario. It's like we're spending every dollar.
Okay,
So.
right. Like the yellow's going to turn red, or?
It can turn red.
Where are we
So
in
what
the
we know,
yellow?
what,
Are you
if you were to
running
look,
through it, or you know you got some time?
the way I see it is I would rather live in the red so that so we can stay in the yellow.
One other comment about as you dig a little bit deeper into that data, of the 21 school districts who are good in the green, I would say the average enrollment of those 21 school districts is 1,000 or less. It's school districts with a much smaller budget and a much, I don't want to say less complex system, but that's part of it as well. So there's some big systems with big contracts that aren't sustainable.
I think one of the other things that we noticed on some of the school districts that were in binding conditions or got close to is when they did their 4-year projections, they weren't even making any adjustments. It was just the same. So that's how much thought they put into it. So here, I tried to put as much thought as I can. Yes, it looks like we're in the red, but knowing that we probably won't spend 92% of it, it just makes me, it gives us capacity in case something were to happen. The next one, expenditures by activity. So that's the second part of the expenditure code. So how much do we spend on teaching? How much do we spend on curriculum? So the full instructional support comes out to $68 million compared to last year's budget of $65.3 million. So if anybody would want to know how much we spent, how much we're budgeting in utilities, it's $1.5 million compared to last year's 1.3. Hopefully we don't spend the full 1.5. Hopefully we spend 1.2. Those are the kind of things that we don't know, right? Do you have any questions on this slide? You're waiting for the big slide, huh? Okay, so the next one just gives you the information about what those pockets mean. Those account codes, activity codes. Okay, employee FTE. So here you can see in 26-27 we're going to budget 303.5 certificated staff and 214 classified staff for a total with benefits of $70.2 million. Last year, you can see that we budgeted 0.21 more in certificated, and we have 3.1 less. We have 3.175 more in classified this year, and that is because of the ECAP. We're bringing the ECAP employees into our payroll system. So, any questions on that? No? Okay, now change to ending fund balance. Fund balance is what's left over after all the expenses are paid. So here's that number again, where our beginning fund balance is projected to be 15.2. In last year's budget, I was projecting this to be a lot less than that. So we are being very fiscally sound. Every question, every expense that comes in, we're looking at it. We're not spending money just to spend it. So I think we're doing really good. This does look like we're going to be in the going to our fund balance 4.5 million, but we know it won't be that much. History does tell us that we will be in the negative, like in the previous 3 school years. If you notice in the 22-23 and the 21-22, we actually increased our fund balance because we used our ESSER funding to pay our basic ed teachers, and that made our fund balance go up. So imagine if that hadn't happened. Okay, any questions? Okay, this one, we're required to have this slide. This tells us that based on our student count, we're going to get $7 million in MSOC funding and basic ed, and we're going to spend almost $12 million. Where does the difference come from? Levy LEA support. 4-year budget forecast. So before we can determine what our 4-year revenues and expenditures will be, we have to figure out where our enrollment's going to be, because that drives our funding, right? So here you can see where we roll up our student count. We make the adjustments to our incoming 11th graders. Our kinder enrollment was based on births from Adams County. So you can see what our enrollment's going to look like by 29-30. And this is K-12. This doesn't include all the other student enrollments that we have. Okay. This slide, I was telling Lori before when we were reviewing these slides, I said the only number that's accurate on this one is at 34 on the bottom. Everything else, this is just a projection. We're projecting that our ending fund balance is 15.2. If half of our staff doesn't show up for summer PD in the next couple of weeks, that could be 16 million. If they all show up, it could be a little bit less. We don't know. This is what we're projecting.
Sorry, which one was the one that you said is not a projection?
the number of the slide.
Oh, I was like trying to find what you were talking about.
So based on this one, there again, our ending fund balance in the end of school year 26-27 will be 10.7 million, which is 12% of our expenditures.
But that's if you spent 100% of our budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Which we
this
know.
is scary.
Yeah, which we know we won't spend all of it. This is worst case scenario.
And I think to Mariah's question, or Director Munoz, I apologize. The projected beginning fund balance in last year's presentation was 11.1 million. That's what we predicted for 26-27, which is where we're at right now. And the actual is 15.2. Mm-hmm. So that $4 million gap. So even if when you think about these large numbers, again, it's projecting in a way that's, I think what lands with people is to say, well, this is worst case scenario. It's also a style of budgeting that's aggressive and more to say, if we want to have the capacity to be able to spend or to bring in revenue. But this is probably not going to be the case, right? And it can get intimidating when you see negative 3.1 and 28-29, right? But even this year, we know that those numbers are hopefully not something we have to deal with. But I think we should be transparent in how we're communicating it out. Yeah. Are we spending more than we're bringing in? Absolutely. Is it that much? Probably not.
We will know more about our beginning fund balance by October 25th. That's when our financials are due. We'll know an exact number by then. And then once September payroll is entered in September, that'll give us a big idea of, okay, how much of what we budgeted for our salaries, how much is it for reals? So we have come pretty close in our salaries. Our budget is usually pretty spot on our HR budget. The only thing that we might budget and we don't actually spend is if, like I said, if people don't show up for summer PD. I did put a little blurb on the bottom. So our debt service fund, where we've been paying our bond, has been earning interest since day one. That's about 1.2 million. We were notified by council that money can be transferred at the end, possibly to our general fund. So in 28, 29, we could probably see a transfer there, but that's going to require board resolution and board council to come in and make sure. We've never done this before, so we're in 28, 29. There should be that amount coming into our general fund, but I don't want to count it just yet. And we're hoping we get more Primera money, since nobody else. Do you guys have any questions on that? Like I said, the other one, do you see the green numbers on the very top, the IPD? So this year we know for sure it's 2.6. I have no idea what the next 3 years are going to be. If those numbers, so the higher the number, the more our salaries are going to cost, right? Because that's increase on salaries. And as of right now, we don't know what those percentages are going to be. Okay. Next page. So this one is just same thing, same amount, but by program. And then looking ahead. So to me, this is probably the most important slide because I want you guys to feel safe knowing that 26, 27 budget, it's a good budget. We're still fiscally sound. We will know more during the year what needs to happen in 27, 28. We'll just have to wait till year end's done. We have to wait till all the salaries are entered. And then we could start looking in January once we know how many kids do we have. What if we have 150 more students than what we projected? What if we have 150 less? We don't know. So once we have all that information in January, we can start deciding what do we have to do in 27, 28. So the reason that I picked these students are the ones that are going to be freshmen. And this 4-year budget, we want, this is who we're doing what we do for. This is where the hard work comes, and we're up to it. We're up to it. We're going to be fine. So the closing message is, our goal is simple. We're going to make thoughtful decisions today so that OSD remains financially strong for future generation students. We are trying super hard for every decision to be based on what we think it's going to be the next 4 years. So I could sit here and say, our student count's going to go up 200 and our revenue is going to go up 20% and we're going to be just fine. And then I show up and our kids didn't show up. I'm showing you worst case scenario. I thought I had. The other thing that we have to remember on those numbers too is the decrease in our LEA money. That's going to play a huge factor in that, and hoping our property values stay about where we think they're going to be.
Amy, I always think that you and your team do a wonderful job. And I appreciate it. It's not easy, and then it's not easy dumbing it down for people like us that don't work with numbers like that. I got all the faith in the world in your team. I don't have a lot of faith in this state right now, just because of how many schools are in dire straits, and it just doesn't make you feel comfortable. If you tell me that we are sound for one more year, I believe you. I believe you and your team.
Yeah.
I can go home and rest easy and not yell and scream, and that's the end of the world. So if you tell us that we're sound for one more year, I appreciate everything you guys do, and I'm pretty sure the rest of the board does too. It can't be easy to have these things.
I'm in there every week showing Pete numbers. He's showing him my spreadsheets. I tell him I dream in numbers, and I stay up. I numbers keep me up at night so that you guys could sleep easy.
And you know what? He has shared that you do. You're the one that No, and he's always told us to kind of maybe. And we appreciate that, and we appreciate everything that you and your team does. And thank you for the presentation.
Amy mentioned it earlier, but I don't want to overlook it that we always get clean audits with Amy and her team. I usually sit in on those meetings, and they're always really short because they're always like, we didn't find anything.
Yeah.
And Amy and her team are really great, and so we appreciate it.
I have an amazing team, amazing finance department. So I've been very, very blessed with that. There's a couple more sites, and it's just on the other 4 funds, capital projects. We're just going to have that grant. The biggest one will be the air quality expenditure. And then if you can see, after we do the expenses, there's a Ludocaga roof repair if needed, and then the expenditures for the bond, and then some miscellaneous. So there you can see why that $300,000 is necessary to do it now, so that we have capacity in future years. Because there's nothing replenishing this account except for a little bit of interest. The debt service fund, this one's the fun one because this one shows that it gets paid during the school year 27-28, and then there's a fund balance beginning of the 1.2 million that we're hoping can get transferred to the general fund.
Pete, I had a question on the slide previous to that one, on the miscellaneous. Was that going to take care of our the Husky Field issue that we talked about?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Then we have our ASB. Looks to be a pretty good 4-year forecast. Then the transportation one, this one might be a little iffy down the road, where we won't be able to purchase as many buses as we've been used to because of the depreciation change. So,
Are we sitting good now, Pete, with those purchased ones that are we sitting okay? Or do you, I know Marion,
Yeah.
but are we sitting okay in that aspect?
Yeah, I think the replacement cycle and the level of maintenance and thinking that they have over there, we're in a strong position in transportation.
the only thing would happen, like, let's say 27, 28, where our ending fund balance would be 90,000. Let's just, if we have 2 buses that the engines blow, that could take most of that fund balance. But that, we're talking to you for a transfer. And then, so next steps, August 24th, we'll have the budget hearing. It'll be open to any public comment, and then during the regular board meeting, it'll be the resolution where you guys sign for the 26-27 budget.
Right, we appreciate that from Amy and Lori and sharing with the board. Again, a lengthy conversation, and I think it's important that we have those in public and we share with folks how things are looking in our community and how that fits in the broader context of the state. So a couple weeks to consider it, to ask your questions. Certainly send them our way if you have other questions or comments, and we'll look for the next step at the next meeting. So thanks for hanging in there for the presentation, and thank you for...
I did shorten it 20 slides.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, we budgeted 100 slides, but we came in at 80, so there you go.
Thank you again. Sorry, thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have some policy review. They are only first readings, so go ahead and review those, and we'll approve them at the next meeting. Do we have any public comment today? Okay. No public comment today. For upcoming events, could we put the calendar up there? We've already talked about the orientations coming up and the special board meeting for the budget hearing, so these are all things we've already talked about. And then school is coming up. August 27th is the first day of school. Anything else for upcoming events? Okay, we'll go ahead into the board self-assessment of the meeting.
Well, I just really appreciated being first year board member, and the thoughtfulness and the detail of the budget and making it you're looking at your home budget and then you're looking at a school budget, right? And we all know that we probably spend a little bit more in our homes too. And so and oftentimes it's because of that picture that you place in what we're looking at in 4 years. Is oftentimes why we might overspend or look at our budget, and it's always because it's our loved ones. And so thank you for that, because it's a good reminder.
Amy, to the team, thank you for everything that you do. Like I said, we could sit here and tell you all night long, but for me, it's thank you for being so frugal, because I can't imagine running a budget that big and projecting things that you have no idea. And we just appreciate everybody. So when you go back to work in the morning, buy them all coffees. Tell me what it costs. I'll cover the costs, because at least that's what they deserve. So thank you.
You got to get it from Coffee Shop Shoe.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We will go ahead and adjourn the meeting.